a shadow that never fades. Thomas Gray woke up in bed with a jolt, sweat clinging to his brow and his small chest heaving under the thin sheets. His room was dark, lit only by the faint glow of the streetlight outside, pushing shadows through the blinds. His eyes darted around the room. The corners were too deep, too silent, as if something watched him from inside them. The house was cold, unreasonably so, and it always seemed colder when he had one of his dreams. No, not dreams. Night terrors. They started a few months ago, not long after his 10th birthday. At first, it was the usual nightmare stuff, falling, drowning, being chased by dogs. But then they changed, grew personal. It began with the voices. They whispered from behind the walls. At first, Thomas thought it was the plumbing or the wind in the crawl space, but they began to take shape. Words, sentences, conversations that didn't belong to anyone in his family. He's still here. He shouldn't have stayed. Take him back down. When he told his parents, they offered reassurances and tighter hugs. His dad chalked it up to stress. His mom took him to a therapist who suggested breathing exercises and kept asking about school bullies. But none of them were in his room at night when the walls pulsed with breath and the ceiling crackled with whispers. The terrors always started the same way. He would open his eyes and be in his bed, frozen. He couldn't move, couldn't scream. And then the door would creak open, slowly, painfully slowly. A tall figure would stand there, half its body still in the hallway, too thin, too crooked, arms longer than they should be. Sometimes it would crawl. Sometimes it would just stand there, and then it would rush him. He would always wake up screaming just before it reached him. Every time. Thomas stopped sleeping. His grades slipped. His eyes grew sunken, his skin pale. The therapist prescribed medication. His parents replaced his nightlight. Nothing helped. Then came the scratches. Tiny claw marks on the wooden bedposts. At first, his parents blamed the dog, but they hadn't had a dog since before Thomas was born. Then came the thudding sounds in the attic, and the cold spots in the hallway that followed him like breath on the back of his neck. It wasn't just him anymore. His mom started complaining about sleepwalking, until they checked the camera. It wasn't her. His dad heard banging in the night. Once, he sprinted upstairs thinking Thomas had fallen, only to find him sitting perfectly still at the edge of the bed, staring at the wall. Thomas didn't remember moving. The worst was the laughter. It wasn't a child's. It was low, ragged, hungry. Finally, the family agreed to move. Just to start fresh, they told him, trying to sound cheerful. Thomas didn't argue. The house was evil. He knew it. The first few weeks in the new house were better. Bright windows, new furniture, a backyard with an oak tree. No dreams. Then came the footsteps. Not the rhythmic creaks of an old house, but intentional steps, like someone walking around the foot of his bed, circling. He tried to hide it from his parents, afraid they'd think he was broken. But then came the sleepwalking. He would wake up standing in the hallway or at the edge of the stairs, cold air wrapping around him like wet cloth. He never remembered getting out of bed. Sometimes he'd be standing in the corner of their room, just watching. One night, he woke up in the hallway. His feet were wet, mud on the floor. He turned around. His bedroom was 20 feet behind him. He had no memory of leaving it. But what paralyzed him was the sound behind him. Stomping. Heavy. Angry. Getting closer. He ran, sprinting back to his room, throwing himself under the covers like they were armor. He didn't sleep, just listened. Breath held. Eventually, the house went quiet. The next morning, he begged, pleaded for his parents to just listen to him. "I don't think it was a house," he whispered. "I think it's me." They stared at him, pale, silent. His mother cried. That night, Thomas heard them talking in their room. He did what he always did, crawled down the hallway in silence and pressed his ear against the door. He thought he might hear them debating another move. Instead, he heard something far worse. "It's been months, Jason. We moved to get away from it all. He's gone. You saw him. The coroner said his heart gave out in his sleep. 10 years old." Thomas didn't move. Couldn't breathe. "I hear him at night. In the hall. I see him in my dreams. I see him in our room. His father's voice cracked. Me too. Thomas staggered back down the hallway, hands trembling, breath shaking. He wasn't alive. He was the thing in the hallway. He was the night terror. Trees, don't whisper. It was supposed to be a weekend unwind. Just two guys, a couple of tents, a cooler full of beer, and no self-service. A retreat from the noise. That's what Ryan kept telling himself as he looked out the passenger window of Ben's beat-up Subaru, the forest canopy thickening with every mile they drove into Black Hollow National Preserve. We'll park near the trailhead and hike up to Clearwater Ridge, Ben said, his enthusiasm palpable. No people, no service, no problems. They parked around noon. Sky overcast, air still. Ben shouldered his pack like a soldier. Ryan, less enthusiastic, struggled with his. We should have waited till spring. It's still freezing out here. Quit whining. This'll be great. It was not great. The trail markers were already scarce by the first hour. The trees were unusually close, their trunks mottled with black moss, and there was this faint humming in the air, like far-off machinery, but deeper, almost like growling. They hiked in silence. No birds, no wind, no chatter from other hikers. Ryan kept looking over his shoulder. By late afternoon, the trail had all but vanished. The GPS on Ben's phone was useless. It says we're in the middle of a lake, he muttered. No signal. Ryan asked. Ben shook his head. Nothing. They set up camp in a clearing surrounded by impossibly tall pines, the bark of which looked scorched at the base, as if they'd been burned in a fire that never made it past their roots. Ryan lit a fire while Ben tried to boil water. The pot tipped. The fire sputtered. Mosquitoes came early. Then the whispers began. Ryan sat bolt upright around midnight, shaking Ben awake. You hear that? Ben blinked. What? Voices. Around the tent. Just listen. They held their breath. For a moment, there was nothing. Then, almost imperceptibly, help down here. Lost cold. Stay forever. Ben unzipped the tent, flashlight in hand, and stepped into the dark. The beam revealed only trees. Still, silent. No wind. No leaves rustling. No birds. I don't like this, Ben said. Let's go back tomorrow. Ryan nodded. Morning was no better. The path they'd come in on was gone. Not overgrown. Gone. Even the footprints they'd left near the clearing had vanished. Ben tried to backtrack, using a compass. The needle spun erratically. By noon, they realized they were walking in circles. The trees all looked the same, scarred at the base, reaching forever upward. Then came the fog. It rolled in without warning. Thick, low, like the ground was exhaling. Ryan stumbled into a shallow pit filled with wet leaves and twisted sticks. When Ben pulled him out, they found a small animal skull lodged in the mud. Still fresh. Still red. They didn't speak much after that. The whispers returned that night. Louder. More desperate. Don't leave us. It's so cold. You'll see it soon? Ben woke to Ryan gone. Panic surged. He followed footprints through the underbrush for nearly 20 minutes until he found Ryan standing perfectly still, barefoot, staring up into the trees. Ryan. Ryan didn't respond. Ben shook him. Ryan blinked, as if waking from a dream. I was in my sleeping bag, and then I was here. I saw something. In the trees. What? Eyes. A face. Watching. Ben looked up. Only trees. But they weren't alone. Something was moving just at the edge of visibility. Always behind trunks. Always too far to make out. That's when Ben saw him, across the clearing, just for a second, barely visible through the fog. A tall man in a dark coat and a wide-brimmed hat, standing perfectly still between two trees, watching them. Hey! Ben shouted. The figure didn't move. He blinked, and the man was gone. They sprinted back to camp, only to find their gear torn, cooler contents strewn across the ground. Tent collapsed like it had been trampled. No animals around. That night, they huddled by a pathetic fire, backs to each other. Ryan mumbled in his sleep, sweating through his jacket. Don't let it in, not again. Ben didn't sleep. Ryan was getting worse. He said he couldn't tell if he was dreaming anymore. Said something was inside the woods. Not an animal, not a person. It's wearing the forest like a coat, he whispered. Pretending. They wandered deeper, hoping for a road, a ranger station, anything. Around dusk, they stumbled upon a tree that didn't match the others. It was massive, blackened, and hollow, with strange symbols carved into the bark. Beneath it, bones. Dozens. Human and animal, arranged in spirals. Ben pulled Ryan back. We have to go. Now. But as they turned, the fog returned. Thicker this time. The path behind them was gone. Again, Ben screamed in frustration. Ryan just stood there, mumbling, I think we're not supposed to leave. It wasn't until early morning of the fifth day that they heard a voice, clear, human. Boys. They stumbled toward the sound like dying men crawling to water. There he was, a tall man in a heavy wool coat, wide-brimmed hat shadowing his face. He held a lantern that burned with a strange, cold blue flame. You're not where you should be, he said. Ben collapsed in relief. Ryan just stared, wide-eyed. Who are you? Someone who knows this forest better than it knows itself. He led them in silence, through trees that seemed to move out of his way. Paths unfolded that hadn't been there before. The fog receded as he walked. They exited the forest near a maintenance road. A ranger station sat half a mile down. The man tipped his hat. You'll be safe now. Before they could thank him, he was gone. Just gone. Like he had never been there. A ranger said they were lucky. Said people get lost all the time up in Black Hollow, but not many are found. Ben asked if he knew a tall man in a coat and hat who helped hikers. The ranger paled. We stopped sending people into that part of the woods years ago, after the disappearances. But yeah, stories go back decades, about a man in a wide-brimmed hat who shows up when the forest gets hungry. Ryan didn't say a word. He just stared into the trees, lips moving silently. Ben caught just one phrase. It's wearing the forest like a coat. Golden. Gem rock mining. There was an old man. Well, not always old, of course, named Angus Darby. Back then, he was just Gus, a wiry bloke in his early 30s with sunburned arms, a thick beard, and a stubborn streak that made him a legend in his own right. He bought a humble 5-acre block of land near the gem fields in central Queensland for just $35,000. That was all the money he had, and he didn't even blink as he handed it over. With no home, no power, no running water, Gus set to work. He cut down iron barks and spotted gums with a chainsaw, milled them on-site, using a janky old portable mill he rented for next to nothing. He built the frame of his house with his own 2 hands. Walls of timber, corrugated iron roofing, and a concrete slab he poured himself with a wheelbarrow and buckets. The place was simple. No phone line, no internet, just a rustle of eucalyptus, the call of kookaburras, and the shimmer of heat rising from the red dirt. Gus didn't care for much, but he did love rocks. He'd been fascinated by gemstones since he was a kid. He used to say the earth hid its treasures deep, like it was daring you to find them. So, when he heard that the gem fields around Emerald, yes, that's the name of the town, were known for sapphires and emeralds, he thought, why the hell not? What started as a hobby became a bit more. He built a small hand-cranked wash plant from scrap metal. Every week, he'd dig and wash, sometimes pulling up nothing, other times finding little green glints of emerald or flashes of blue sapphire. They weren't worth a fortune, not even close, but he'd sell them at local markets and sometimes to passing gem dealers. A few $100 here, a few hundred there, enough to keep him stocked with diesel, coffee, flour, and smokes. He lived cheap and saved what little he could. Never had a credit card. Never took a loan. That was Gus. After nearly a decade, Gus had saved enough to invest in some serious gear. Nothing massive. Just a second-hand hydraulic auger and a newer wash plant that could go deeper and filter finer sediment. He started drilling a bit further down into the clay under his block. One day, while following a trail of quartz veins, he hit something unexpected. The quartz wasn't empty. It was laced with dull yellow. At first, He thought it was pyrite, fool's gold. But when he panned it properly, he knew it was gold, real gold, not a vein thick enough to be mined commercially, but enough to matter. He followed the vein for weeks. The clay was dense, sticky, and riddled with quartz, so the separation process wasn't easy. Gus was clever, though. He built a crude stamp mill using scrap car parts and bits of an old washing machine. It crushed the quartz. Then he used mercury and later a cyanide-free leaching process. He read about it in some dusty mining manual from the 1930s to separate the gold from the slurry. He didn't make a big deal of it. Never told a soul, not even the postman or the one pub local who tried to befriend him. Gus would sell tiny bits here and there. Grams, never ounces. A few $100s at a time. He didn't want attention. He didn't want trouble. He buried most of it, metaphorically and literally. Stored in cleaned-out coffee tins and old tobacco tins in a rusted filing cabinet in the back of his shed. Over time, it must have amounted to several kilos. But Gus never spent it, never upgraded, never moved, just lived his life with his bush hat, his stubby shorts, and his dog named Copper. Then, one year, he was just gone. No funeral, no obituary. His shack sat silent, dust and cobwebs growing thicker with every passing month. Fast forward to about 6 months ago. That's when I come into the story. I'd heard about cheap rural land going up for auction in Queensland. I was looking for an escape from city life, from burnout, from everything. The property was a mess. Overgrown, half of it reclaimed by scrub. But the shed, it stood firm. Inside, I found rusted tools, jars of old screws, a busted guitar, and a stack of old notebooks in a milk crate. One was a journal. Gus's handwriting was blocky and straightforward. He wrote like he spoke, no fluff, just the facts. Day by day, year by year, he documented his mining experiments, his attempt at gold separation, his thoughts on isolation, and eventually his discovery. It was all there. How he followed the quartz, how he smelted it down, how he never wanted to sell it all because he figured one day someone might need it more than me. He called it his retirement plan, but joked that he'd probably die before using it. If you're reading this, he wrote on the last page, then maybe the gold found you instead. And reader, it did. I searched every inch of that shed until I found the tins. Dozens of them, carefully sealed, some wrapped in old rags, hidden in crevices behind false panels. There was even a metal detector Gus modified to pick up trace gold in quartz. After verifying the gold was real and pure, I started selling tiny amounts just like he did, quietly, discreetly. But it wasn't long before I realized there was more here than just a lucky stash. I bought the surrounding properties, drilled, studied, invested, and I struck more veins, likely connected to the one Gus first found. Within 18 months, I'd founded a legitimate small-scale mining operation. As of now, it's worth several million. And yet, I still live in the same little shack. I renovated it, sure, but Gus's old tools still hang in the shed. His journal sits on my nightstand, and I haven't sold all the gold. Some of it I've left behind, in a new hiding spot. Maybe one day, someone like me will find it. After all, the earth hides its treasures deep, and sometimes it chooses who gets to find them. The man at the lake. I've been sitting on this for years. Told myself it was a dream, trauma, something that time would blur away. But every time I see still water, I remember his face, the way it shouldn't have looked. So here it is. This happened in the summer of 2007, back when I was 14. I lived in a small town in rural Victoria, the kind of place where your parents let you roam for hours as long as you were back before dark. We didn't have much, but we had the lake, Lake Whitmore. Not a huge one, just deep and quiet, ringed by old gum trees and half-collapsed jetty planks. It had this permanent chill, even in December. No one swam out too far. Locals said it held on to things. Anyway, me and my mates, Ryan and Declan, would bike down after school, throw stones, skip rocks, try to impress each other with how far we could wade in before freaking ourselves out. Typical dumb kid stuff. Then there was Mr. Hargreaves. He was probably mid-50s. Lived in a weatherboard house up on the hill overlooking the lake. Kind of a recluse. Always wore a wide-brimmed hat and beige shirts tucked in too tight. Had this habit of showing up out of nowhere. At first, he just watched us. We figured he was just a weird, lonely guy. Then he started shouting, telling us to stay away from the lake, saying we were messing with things we didn't understand. He accused us of putting dead animals in his yard, breaking his windows. One time he came down ranting that we'd left marks on the water. We didn't even know what that meant. Honestly, we just thought he was going senile. But the weird stuff was happening. Not by us. We'd see ripples when no one had thrown a rock. One day, we found a dead kangaroo by the shoreline, with its legs twisted the wrong way. There were dragging marks, like it had crawled there. Still, we laughed it off. Told each other Hargreaves was just bored and maybe a bit cracked. Then one afternoon in late January, everything went sideways. We were up on the hill trail, just killing time. That's when we heard shouting from down at the jetty. Hargreaves, alone, screaming into the water like a madman. We crept closer through the trees. It was the most unhinged I'd ever seen him. Pointing, cursing, throwing rocks into the lake like he was trying to hit something. Then he stopped, just froze, looked down at the water. We were about 20 meters away, hidden behind a stand of trees. What I saw next is why I can't go near lakes anymore. Something rose up from the water, fast, not like a ripple, not like an animal. It was black and slick and wrong. It had too many limbs, or not enough. I don't know how to explain it. It shifted, like it was folding in on itself and stretching out at the same time. Hargreaves didn't run. He just stood there, like he couldn't move. Then it grabbed him. It didn't drag him under. It opened him, like peeling a jacket off. No sound came out. His mouth moved, but nothing. The thing pulled him in, slowly, like it wanted us to see. And then the lake was still again. We ran. Didn't stop until we hit the road. We never told anyone. Who would believe a bunch of kids? They said Hargreaves must have fallen in, drowned. Never found the body. Only his hat, bobbing at the shore. People forgot. They always do. But me? I see it every time I close my eyes. He thought we were the ones messing with him. We weren't. We were just the ones left to remember. I'd been hitchhiking through New Zealand for a few weeks when I met him, the man with the wide-brimmed hat and the truck that smelled like wet dirt. My name's Alan, 32, backpacker, no fixed address. I've been doing the whole soul search thing after a bad breakup and a career collapse, just wandering the South Island. I had no plan, just a cheap pair of boots, a worn pack, and a head full of static. I was trying to get to Tarangi. Everyone said it was beautiful in a haunted, middle-of-nowhere kind of way. I liked the idea of that. So I stood on the side of a narrow rural road, outside type, thumb out, wind in my face. No cell service, of course. That's when the truck pulled over. It was an old Ford, probably from the 70s, sun-faded green with dents like it had been in a fight with the forest. The man inside wore a dark wool coat, a hat too large for his head, and a smile that felt about 5 seconds too long. You headed north? I asked. He nodded. I'll take you as far as the edge of the Kaimana was. After that, road gets strange. Strange how? He just laughed. A dry, rasping thing. You'll see. I should have trusted my gut and passed. But I was tired, hungry, and broke. So I climbed in. We drove in silence for a while, gravel crunching under the tires. The further we went, the quieter everything got. I don't mean no traffic, kind of quiet. I mean no birds, no bugs, no wind. Just an empty hush, like the world was holding its breath. I tried to make conversation. He didn't answer, just kept tapping the steering wheel like a metronome, staring straight ahead. You from around here? I tried. He chuckled again, this time without opening his mouth. No one's really from here. He said, finally, they just end up here. Red flag number 50. But I stayed. What was I going to do? Roll out at 60 kilometers per hour into the bush? Then I noticed something weird. We hadn't passed another car for over an hour. The road kept winding deeper into trees, so dense they looked sculpted. The light was starting to shift, not getting darker, but somehow more gray, like dust without a sun. I checked my phone. Still no service. Battery at 3%. The man suddenly stopped humming and spoke again, almost to himself. You know what a waka wairoa is? I shook my head. Spirit canoe. Maori legend. They say when a soul is lost, it finds its way to the river that runs underground. That's the journey to the afterworld. But if the soul don't belong, if it's tethered, it drifts, wanders. That sounds cheery, I said, trying to smile. He looked over at me for the first time. His eyes were dark, too dark, like his pupils were swallowing the irises. Some spirits don't want to go. Some don't know how. We crested a hill, and the road seemed to dissolve in the fog. I leaned forward, trying to see through it, and then I noticed the signs. They weren't normal road signs. They were crude, hand-carved wood, nailed into trees. Turn back. Not for the living. The hungry walk here. What the hell is this? I asked, panic rising. The man didn't answer. He just pulled the truck over beside a tree that looked half dead, its bark black and weeping sap. We're here. Where? He pointed into the bush. Path takes you the rest of the way. I stared into the trees. There was a path, kind of, just barely visible. Muddy, narrow, choked with roots. I think I'll stay in the truck, man. He shook his head slowly. No, you won't. I turned to open the door and realized it wouldn't open, neither would the window. My heart kicked into overdrive. You died on this road, Alan, he said softly. I froze. What? He nodded toward my chest. I looked down and saw blood, dry, caked into my shirt, more on my jeans. My hands shook as I touched my side. I hadn't even felt it until that moment. You were picked up 2 days ago by a driver on meth. Swerved off the road. Never found your body. The forest kept it. I started shaking. No, I'm alive. I'm right here. Exactly, he said. You're here. And this place, it doesn't let go. He opened his door and stepped out. For a moment, the light caught his face, and I saw it wasn't a face at all, more like the impression of one. Hollow eyes, a stretched grin, like tree bark molded into a man. I screamed. He didn't flinch. The dead need to walk until they remember what they are, he said. This road is your waka wairoa now. Walk it. The door unlocked by itself. Something pulled me, physically pulled, from the truck, my legs moving without my control. I screamed, begged, clawed at the door, but my feet kept stepping, one after another, into the trees. The fog closing behind me like a mouth shutting. I don't know how long I've been walking. Time doesn't work here. But if you're ever in New Zealand and someone in a green truck offers you a ride near Taihape, don't get in. He's still driving that road, looking for the next lost soul. The Woman in the Woods. Our family lived on a modest farm tucked deep in the woods of northern Pennsylvania. It was the early 1900s. No electricity, no neighbors for miles, just thick trees, cold earth, and the sound of the wild all around us. My father built the house with his own 2 hands, clearing trees one by one to make space for the little cabin where we lived. He used the wood for our fireplace and our fences, and he always told me the forest would take back what didn't belong if we weren't careful. One night in early autumn, I was sitting by the window in my room, a candle flickering low on my bedside table. The wind whispered through the tall pines that bordered the field, and beyond them, nothing but shadow. That's when I saw her, a tall, thin figure standing between the trees. Her dress was long, black, tattered like a funeral gown dragged through dirt. Her skin looked pale, even in the moonlight, and her eyes, if she had eyes, seemed to be watching me. She didn't move. She didn't flinch. Just stood there, barely visible in the darkness. I rubbed my eyes, thinking it was a trick of the candlelight. When I looked again, she was gone. After that, I felt it every time I played outside, like something was watching me. Even on the brightest days, I'd catch my breath suddenly, sensing eyes on my back. but I said nothing. I didn't want to seem like a coward. Once a month, I'd venture into the woods. Not far, just enough to push past the tree line. My boots would crunch on old pine needles, and I'd whisper to the trees, daring her to show herself again. But she never did. Then winter came, cold and cruel. One day, while wandering the forest edge, I found something. A bird, dead, stiff, its neck twisted unnaturally. A few feet further, a rabbit with its stomach torn open. Then a sheep, one of ours, missing for days. It was soaked in dry blood, its eyes wide with terror. All the bodies led in a line, deeper into the woods. On one tree, there were streaks of blood, not like claw marks. No, these were drag handprints. I followed them, heart racing, breath cloudy in the cold air. But the trail vanished beyond a thicket of blackbriars. I ran home. That night, I saw her again. She was standing in the same place between the trees. But this time, there was blood dripping from her mouth, thick and slow like syrup. Her head tilted ever so slightly, and I swear she smiled. I yanked the blinds down so fast the candle nearly went out. I told my parents, told them everything. My mother clutched her apron and said I had too much imagination. My father scoffed. "I've been in those woods more than you've been alive," he said, setting down his pipe. "I cut lumber there, hunted. There ain't no woman out there, son. You're seeing shadows." He even told me he cut down the last tree by my window so he could chop it up for firewood. "Nothing left to tap on the glass now," he said with a smirk. But I knew better. Weeks passed. No woman, no animals, just snow and silence. Until one rainy night, I was laying in bed, listening to the water drum on the roof. The wind carried a new sound, a soft rustle, not like rain, more like footsteps on wet grass. I crept to the window and peeked out. She was there, but not in the woods. She was on the field now, closer, her black dress soaked and clinging to her thin frame. She walked slowly, deliberately, her eyes fixed on my window. I screamed, ran straight into my parents' room. My father leapt up, grabbed his shotgun, and burst out the front door into the storm. He searched the yard, the woods, everything. Came back soaked and furious. "There's nothing out there," he barked. But I knew what I saw. I stopped sleeping. For the next 8 months, every single night, I'd stare at that window, waiting, but she never came back. Eventually, I started closing the blinds. And that's when the tapping began. Light at first, just once or twice a night. I told myself it was the wind or a loose shingle. But some nights, it would go on for hours. Tap, tap, tap. Weeks later, I walked out into the woods again. Not far, just past a line of trees. But there were no bodies now. No blood. No handprints. Just silence. I laughed at myself. Maybe they were right. Maybe I'd made it all up. A scared little boy's fantasy. I felt foolish. That night, I went to bed, finally at ease. I laid on my back, staring up at the wooden ceiling, listening to the tapping. Tap, 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 and then something clicked. The tree was gone. There was no branch left to tap the glass. My blood turned cold. I sat up slowly. The tapping continued, rhythmic, deliberate. I stood up, legs trembling, and walked to the window. My hand reached out and gripped the blind string. With a swift motion, I pulled it open, and there she was, a tall, slender woman in black, her face pale as snow, her mouth twisted in a wide, blood-red smile, eyes bloodshot and bulging, staring straight into mine, her long hands pressed against the glass. I didn't even have time to scream. She shattered the window. Her hands grabbed me, fast as lightning, her fingers cold and hard like bone. She pulled me through the window as if I weighed nothing. I felt my neck twist violently, snap, and everything went black. I heard my mother's scream echo in the distance, then my father's boots pounding on the wooden floor. They burst into my room, but I was gone, just blood, broken glass, a cold wind. My father rushed to the window and looked out into the woods, shotgun shaking in his hands. That's when he saw them, 2 tiny red dots, glowing faintly, watching from the dark, frozen with fear. For years now, I have watched my family grow old from the darkness of the forest I now call home. The cave. They say that on clear nights, if you stare too long at the peak of Black Hollow Mountain, you'll see a flicker of movement near the mouth of the cave, like a shadow peeling itself from stone. The locals call it the Devil's Maw, a jagged hole carved into the face of the mountain, where wind howls like a dying animal and the air tastes of iron and old rot. No one goes near it. Not anymore. Years ago, before people truly understood what lived up there, children from the village below would disappear. Not many. 1, maybe 2 a year. Always at night. Always between the first frost and the last snowfall. It was easy at first to blame wolves, or the cold, or the deep woods that bordered the village where a child could wander too far and get lost forever. But even then there were signs. Little things. Bloodless footprints in the snow, leading toward the mountain. Claw marks on bedroom windowsills 3 stories up. Parents waking to find the front doors wide open, despite triple locks and barricades. Then came the drawings. It started with a boy named Elliot, barely 6 years old. He hadn't spoken in days, only scribbled with black crayons, page after page, as if something were guiding his hand. His parents brought them to the town priest. The drawings were all the same, a long, thin shape with twisted limbs and a face like a melted mask. No eyes, just deep hollows at leaf pitch. They tried to get help. They brought in a doctor from the city. He didn't last the night. Elliot vanished 2 days later. His bed was untouched, blankets still warm, and on the floor beneath the window, a single black feather lay curled in the frost. That was 10 years ago. Since then, the town learned to obey the old rules, handed down by whispers from those who remember the old stories. Never speak of the cave after dark. Never light a fire on your porch between October and March. And never, ever leave your child's window unlocked. The creature, they say, is older than the mountain. It doesn't eat flesh, not at first. It feeds on fear, dreams, and voices, draining everything until the child is nothing but a husk. Sometimes, villagers say they hear laughter in the wind. High-pitched, childlike, twisted. Every generation has its skeptic, of course. The most recent was a man named Hal Owens, who moved to the village with his young daughter, Ava, after his wife died in a fire. He didn't believe in monsters. He didn't believe in much of anything. When the locals warned him, he laughed in their faces and slammed the door. That winter was the coldest in 30 years. On the night of the first snowfall, Ava started sleepwalking. Hal would find her at the front door, barefoot, whispering something about a friend in the mountain who missed her. When he asked who, she'd just point to the dark ceiling and say, "The one who comes through cracks." He installed cameras, motion sensors, alarms. Nothing helped. One morning, Hal woke up to silence. Ava's bed was empty. The front door was ajar. Snow had drifted in. Her small footprints led out into the woods, straight toward Black Hollow Mountain. Hal followed them. He didn't stop for food or rest, just climbed, through biting wind and steep ridges, up the mountain where even birds refused to fly. By the time he reached the cave, his hands were frozen and his sanity frayed. The entrance to the cave pulsed with heat like a living thing. Inside, it was too dark for his flashlight to pierce. The air was thick, like breathing through a wet cloth. Then he heard it, a soft, rhythmic humming, a lullaby, Ava's voice, and something else. The creature unfolded from the darkness like a spider blooming from its web. Its limbs scraped against the stone. Its head tilted impossibly slow. It wore a necklace of children's teeth. In its chest, where a heart should be, was a hollow cage, and inside it, faces twisted in silent screams. Hal screamed too. No one knows what happened after that. But they found the cave a week later, during a thaw, when the snow cracked and receded just enough. The search party only went in 30 feet before they turned back, vomiting and weeping. They never said what they saw. But the Owens house stands empty now. The windows boarded, the doors nailed shut. Some nights, children say they hear knocking from inside. Other nights, laughter. And every winter, When the first snow falls, a black feather appears on someone's porch. The villagers know what it means. The cave is hungry again. The Last Bet. Ethan Wells was a man of routine. He had a modest house in the suburbs, a wife named Laura who laughed like sunshine, and 2 kids who thought the world began and ended at their father's shoes. He worked at a car dealership, wasn't rich, but had saved well. Life was calm, simple, until Friday nights with the boys started becoming something else. It started innocently, as it often does. Poker night in his friend Ryan's basement. Just $50 to play. Then $100. Then $200. His hands shook with every win. The thrill wasn't the money, it was the rush. The laughter of his friends. The sound of cards slapping against the table. The illusion of control. He began sneaking out cash from a vacation fund. Then the kids' college savings. I'll win it back next week, he told himself. His luck wasn't always bad. That was the problem. One night, he turned $500 into $10,000 at the casino downtown. When he came home, high off the win, Laura asked where the money came from. He lied. She wanted to believe him. So she did. But the losses came harder than the wins. He began calling in sick to work. Started driving out to shady backroom games in the city. When the savings were gone, he remortgaged the house. When that wasn't enough, he sold it. Laura begged him to stop. His children cried when they moved into a cramped apartment. He swore it was just one more big one away. Then came the divorce. I can't watch you destroy yourself, Laura said, handing him papers. And I won't let you take our kids with you. He watched her pack their lives into boxes. The day they left, he stood in the doorway, fingers twitching, already planning the next bet. He worked odd jobs, loading docks, moving furniture, cleaning out storage units, just to feed the beast. Gambling apps buzzed on his phone. He played poker online until dawn, snuck into underground games with strangers who smelled like stale beer and desperation. He told himself he was fine. He was in control. His friends slowly stopped answering his calls. Even Ryan, who once sat beside him cheering over every flush, had distanced himself. Years passed like a fever dream. Then one night, at a casino 3 towns over, he hit a streak. Slot machine, blackjack, poker. He won everything. By the end of the weekend, he walked out with $700,000. He stared at the check, hands trembling. It felt fake. He bought his house back, bought a newer car, tried to call Laura. The number was disconnected. He reached out to his kids on social media. No reply. He walked into his old bedroom. It was just furniture now. He kept playing. With every bet, he won more. $1 million. $3 million. News stories called him the luckiest man alive. Casinos offered him rooms and champagne. He was drowning in money. But he ate alone, slept alone, laughed at nothing. And then one cold night in Vegas, he decided to bet everything. $5.6 million. One hand. The dealer's face was blank. The cards were slow. He lost. Just like that, everything vanished. The house, the car, the money, gone. He wandered outside. The neon signs blurred through his tears. He had no home to return to, no one to call, no one to tell. The world had moved on. He walked for hours, past people who didn't see him, down to the beach, where the moonlight danced across the ocean, like it didn't know what he'd done. He sat in the sand and listened to the waves. He thought about Laura, about his children's little hands wrapped around his fingers, about all the birthdays missed, the goodnight kisses never given, the life he had thrown away for nothing. He stood slowly, took off his shoes, walked into the water. The waves took him gently. He was never seen again. Gambling isn't just a game, it can take everything. If you're struggling, please seek help. You're not alone.
The library that only appears at midnight. You wake at midnight, not because of a noise, not because of a dream, but because something in the air has shifted. You sit up in bed and glance at the clock, 12 a.m. Exactly. To the minute. Outside your window, the city is quiet. No cars. No footsteps. Just the hush of sleep settled over the world. And then, you see it. A soft light. Not bright like street lamps. Not harsh like screens. But warm. Golden. Like candlelight caught in mist. It glows from the edge of the part where nothing's been for years. But now, there's something there. A building. Tall. With curved glass windows and ivy crawling up its sides. A sign over the arched door reads, "The Midnight Library." Curiosity pulls you from bed like a string tied to your chest. You slip into your coat, step outside, and walk toward the light. As you get closer, the air changes. It smells like old books and soft rain. The kind of scent that makes you feel like you've been here before, even if you haven't. The door creaks open at your touch, but no alarm goes off. No librarian shushes you. Instead, you're greeted by silence. The kind that welcomes you in, wraps you in a warm blanket, and says, "You're safe here. Stay as long as you need." The inside is enormous. Spiral staircases, floating lanterns, endless shelves stretching into a cozy velvet sky. The walls shift gently, as if the building is breathing. A cat naps on a cushioned bench nearby, its ears twitching in dreams. You walk quietly, your footsteps softened by thick carpets. On the shelves, the books aren't labeled by author or genre. They're labeled by feeling. For when you're afraid of the future. For when you need to believe again. For the lonely but hopeful. For those who want to rest. You reach out and choose one at random. The spine is warm to the touch. You open it. And suddenly, you're not in the library anymore. You're on a hill, watching children fly kites powered by solar ribbons that sparkle in the sun. A gentle voice narrates in your head. In this world, energy is free and abundant. No one pays for light or warmth. The wind belongs to everyone, and so does the sky. You turn the page. Now you're in a home where plants grow from the walls, cleaning the air and humming softly. You can hear the voice again. Every home is alive now, designed to care for the people who live in it. They learn your rhythms. They make tea when you've had a hard day. They remind you to call your grandmother, and never forget your favorite songs. Another page. You're watching two children play on a moonlit shore, stars shifting above them in real time. One of them says, "Our school is run by dreamers. They teach us how to imagine better worlds. Then we vote on which one to build next." You smile. These aren't fantasy lands. They feel real. Tangible. Like echoes from a future that's just waiting for us to catch up. You close the book gently and place it back on the shelf. In the distance, a clock chimes softly. You glance up. It's nearly 1 a.m. You walk deeper into the library, passing a hallway lined with glowing doors. Each one is labeled Dream Archives, Unwritten Tomorrows, Stories that help you sleep, Memories from the future. You choose one. It leads you to a room with cushions on the floor, a skylight that shows constellations you've never seen before, and walls that glow with stories written in floating ink. You sit, and the walls begin to read to you. The stories are soft, slow, and kind. Tales of people who made peace with themselves. Robots who learned to garden. Cities that apologized to rivers. A boy who grew stars in his backyard. A grandmother who made soup so good, it cured heartbreak. Eventually, your eyes grow heavy. The voice of the story fades to a whisper, then to a hum, then to silence. When you open your eyes, you're back in your bed. The clock says 7:04 a.m. Morning light spills across your blanket. You rush to the window, but there's no sign of the library. Just the empty park. Same as always. But your shoes are still damp from last night. And your hands smell faintly of lavender and ink. You smile. Because maybe the Midnight Library doesn't need to be seen. Maybe it only needs to be remembered. And maybe, it will appear again. The next time the future feels too heavy. Or when a quiet voice in your chest whispers, "It's time for a story."
If you like my videos, like, share, and subscribe if you want to see more.
Bedtime stories, the ship that sailed forever. They say it only appears when the fog is thickest, when the sea falls silent, and even the gulls stop calling. A ship. Massive. Silent. floating just beyond the horizon. Most sailors know better than to follow it. But a few don't come back. You saw it first from the cliffs above Black Harbor. It wasn't in any registry. No flags, no crew, no wake. Just a vast, gleaming ocean liner, anchored miles offshore. Its lights were on. Every deck aglow. Thousands of tiny windows lit like fireflies, pulsing gently in the fog. But not a single sound. No music. No laughter. No engine. Just there. Watching. You rented a small fishing boat from a man who warned you not to go. He said the last one who chased that ship came back half-mad, mumbling about ballroom music and passengers with empty faces. But you went anyway. The sea was dead calm. Too calm. Even the waves seemed to hold their breath. As you neared the ship, its sheer size became unreal. It stretched into the fog like it had no end. Black hull. Silver railings. Towering decks. And not a soul in sight. You tied off your boat and climbed aboard. No alarms. No crew. Just the faint scent of salt and old perfume. The deck was pristine. Chairs perfectly arranged. Tables set with untouched glasses. Everything waiting for a party that never came. The silence was heavy. As if something enormous had just stepped out of the room, and might return at any moment. You wandered. Slowly. Each step echoed. And then you heard it. A faint string quartet. Distant. From below. You followed the sound down wide staircases, through long hallways that curved gently with the ship's frame. The lights flickered, but never went out. You passed cabins. Hundreds of them. Every door closed. Every room silent. Yet you felt watched. Not menacing. Not kind either. Just present. Like the ship itself was alive. You reached the ballroom. It was vast and golden and impossibly still. And it was full. Rows and rows of people, all dressed in elegant evening wear from another century. Still. Silent. Not dancing. Not even breathing. Just staring. At you. Their eyes were distant, unfocused. Some smiled faintly, as if remembering a joke told long ago. Others looked sad. Or lost. Or relieved. The music came from an invisible quartet in the far corner. No instruments. No musicians. Just notes hanging in the air like perfume. No one spoke. But you felt a word in your mind. Not spoken, not heard, but felt. Stay. You turned and left the ballroom. Not running, just walking faster than before. Through the quiet halls. Past the quiet rooms. And every time you looked back, there were more footsteps behind you. But no one there. Back on deck, the fog had thickened. The sea was gone. No horizon. No stars. But your little fishing boat still bobbed by the rope. You climbed back down, untied, and drifted away without looking back. You didn't need to. You felt it. The ship watched you go. By morning, there was nothing on the horizon. No lights. No shape. No ship. Just endless gray water. You never told anyone what you saw. At least, not in full. But sometimes, when the fog rolls in thick and low, you walk back to the cliffs. And you wait. Because part of you still hears that music. And part of you, just a small, curious part, wonders, what would have happened if you had stayed?
The wise old man. When James was 7, he wandered through the woods behind his house and found a crooked little cottage that smelled like pine and old books. An old man with kind eyes and a beard like falling snow opened the door. "Lost?" the man asked. "No, sir. I just feel small," James whispered. The old man invited him in. There were books stacked like towers and clocks that ticked like secrets. That day, the old man taught him a simple lesson. Confidence begins when you stop comparing your steps to someone else's sprint. James returned home and began to stand taller. He tried out for soccer, made new friends, and started to smile more. He began to believe in himself. Years passed. At 13, James came back. He asked, "Why does school feel so hard? Why does no one get me?" The old man gave him tea and said, "Don't aim to be understood, aim to understand." That's where real strength lies. James listened. He stopped arguing with teachers, started listening more. His grades went up, but more importantly, so did his compassion. At 22, James returned again, this time in a suit. How do I succeed in life? How do I stay happy? The old man gave him an old pocket watch and said, "Time is the most precious currency. Spend it on people, not just goals." James took that advice to heart. He built a startup, fell in love, called his mother every Sunday. Life was golden. For years, he kept returning, seeking guidance. Each visit left him wiser, lighter, stronger. But one fall morning, James, now in his 30s, returned to the woods after a long absence. The cottage was quiet. Dust danced in the sunbeams. A letter sat on the old man's desk. "If you're reading this, I've gone to rest. Don't let wisdom become a crutch. You've always had your own." James blinked back tears. For the first time, there was no one to tell him what to do next. He left with a heavy heart. Without the man's words, life slowly changed. A failed investment, a broken engagement. Friends drifted. He tried to recall the advice, but twisted it into shortcuts. The world felt colder. One day, standing before a cracked mirror, James whispered, "Where did I go wrong?" The answer came from within. You stopped listening. Not to him, to yourself. The woman in the woods. Our family lived on a modest farm tucked deep in the woods of northern Pennsylvania. It was the early 1900s. No electricity, no neighbors for miles, just thick trees, cold earth, and the sound of the wild all around us. My father built the house with his own 2 hands, clearing trees one by one to make space for the little cabin where we lived. He used the wood for our fireplace and our fences, and he always told me the forest would take back what didn't belong if we weren't careful. One night in early autumn, I was sitting by the window in my room, a candle flickering low on my bedside table. The wind whispered through the tall pines that bordered the field, and beyond them, nothing but shadow. That's when I saw her, a tall, thin figure standing between the trees. Her dress was long, black, tattered like a funeral gown dragged through dirt. Her skin looked pale, even in the moonlight, and her eyes, if she had eyes, seemed to be watching me. She didn't move. She didn't flinch. Just stood there, barely visible in the darkness. I rubbed my eyes, thinking it was a trick of the candlelight. When I looked again, she was gone. After that, I felt it every time I played outside, like something was watching me. Even on the brightest days, I'd catch my breath suddenly, sensing eyes on my back. But I said nothing. I didn't want to seem like a coward. Once a month, I'd venture into the woods. Not far, just enough to push past the tree line. My boots would crunch on old pine needles, and I'd whisper to the trees, daring her to show herself again. But she never did. Then winter came, cold and cruel. One day, while wandering the forest edge, I found something. A bird, dead, stiff, its neck twisted unnaturally. A few feet further, a rabbit with its stomach torn open. Then a sheep, one of ours, missing for days, it was soaked in dry blood, its eyes wide with terror. All the bodies led in a line, deeper into the woods. On one tree, there were streaks of blood, not like claw marks. No, these were dragged handprints. I followed them, heart racing, breath cloudy in the cold air. But the trail vanished beyond a thicket of blackbriars. I ran home. That night, I saw her again. She was standing in the same place between the trees. But this time, there was blood dripping from her mouth, thick and slow like syrup. Her head tilted ever so slightly, and I swear she smiled. I yanked the blinds down so fast the candle nearly went out. I told my parents, told them everything. My mother clutched her apron and said I had too much imagination. My father scoffed. "I've been in those woods more than you've been alive," he said, setting down his pipe. "I cut lumber there. Hunted. There ain't no woman out there, son. You're seeing shadows." He even told me he cut down the last tree by my window so he could chop it up for firewood. "Nothing left to tap on the glass now," he said with a smirk. But I knew better. Weeks passed. No woman, no animals, just snow and silence. Until one rainy night, I was laying in bed, listening to the water drum on the roof. The wind carried a new sound, a soft rustle, not like rain, more like footsteps on wet grass. I crept to the window and peeked out. She was there, but not in the woods. She was on the field now, closer, her black dress soaked and clinging to her thin frame. She walked slowly, deliberately, her eyes fixed on my window. I screamed, ran straight into my parents' room. My father leapt up, grabbed his shotgun, and burst out the front door into the storm. He searched the yard, the woods, everything. Came back soaked and furious. "There's nothing out there," he barked. But I knew what I saw. I stopped sleeping. For the next 8 months, every single night, I'd stare at that window, waiting, but she never came back. Eventually, I started closing the blinds. And that's when the tapping began. Light at first, just once or twice a night. I told myself it was the wind or a loose shingle. But some nights, it would go on for hours. Tap, tap, tap. Weeks later, I walked out into the woods again. Not far, just past a line of trees. But there were no bodies now. No blood. No handprints. Just silence. I laughed at myself. Maybe they were right. Maybe I'd made it all up. A scared little boy's fantasy. I felt foolish. That night, I went to bed, finally at ease. I laid on my back, staring up at the wooden ceiling, listening to the tapping. Tap, 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 and then something clicked. The tree was gone. There was no branch left to tap the glass. My blood turned cold. I sat up slowly. The tapping continued, rhythmic, deliberate. I stood up, legs trembling, and walked to the window. My hand reached out and gripped the blind string. With a swift motion, I pulled it open, and there she was, a tall, slender woman in black, her face pale as snow, her mouth twisted in a wide, blood-red smile, eyes bloodshot and bulging, staring straight into mine, her long hands pressed against the glass. I didn't even have time to scream. She shattered the window. Her hands grabbed me, fast as lightning, her fingers cold and hard like bone. She pulled me through the window as if I weighed nothing. I felt my neck twist violently, snap, and everything went black. I heard my mother's scream echo in the distance, then my father's boots pounding on the wooden floor. They burst into my room, but I was gone, just blood, broken glass, a cold wind. My father rushed to the window and looked out into the woods, shotgun shaking in his hands. That's when he saw them, 2 tiny red dots, glowing faintly, watching from the dark, frozen with fear. For years now, I have watched my family grow old from the darkness of the forest I now call home. The 10 disasters before, I do. Samantha Grace was a list-loving, color-coding, Type A sweetheart who had dreamed of a perfect wedding since she was 8 years old. When Julian, the love of her life, proposed in a field of sunflowers, she squealed, cried, and immediately opened a Google sheet. Everything was going great, until it wasn't. Problem number 1, the venue double-booked. 6 months of planning down the drain, when the historic garden venue called to say another couple had also booked her date. After a teary night and some wine-fueled internet searching, Samantha stumbled on a vineyard outside town, more beautiful than she could have imagined. They even had alpacas. Problem number 2, the dress disaster. Her custom dress arrived in the wrong size and color. In a panic, Samantha reached out to a seamstress her grandmother recommended. Not only did the woman fix the dress in time, she added hand-sewn lace from her mother's old wedding gown. Cue the tears. Problem number 3, the cake catastrophe. A week before the wedding, the baker had a kitchen fire. Samantha sighed, closed her laptop, and baked cupcakes herself. Julian joined her, covering himself in flour and singing love songs. It wasn't fancy, but it was them. Problem number 4, rain on the big day forecast. The weather app turned evil the day before the wedding. Storms were coming. They scrambled to rent a clear tent setup and strung fairy lights everywhere. That night, Samantha whispered to Julian, "It'll sparkle like magic." And it did. Problem number 5, the flowers froze. The florist truck broke down in the middle of the night in the snow. Samantha's bridesmaids dashed to a local market and gathered wildflowers, sunflowers, and eucalyptus. They created the most whimsical, heartfelt bouquets she'd ever seen. Problem number 6, missing officiant, unreachable, gone. With 15 minutes to ceremony time, Julian's uncle, who had once officiated a friend's wedding in Las Vegas, stepped in. He made everyone laugh and cry with stories of love and grilled cheese. Problem number 7, bridesmaid blunder. Her cousin twisted her ankle that morning. Instead of limping down the aisle, she rode in a decorated wheelchair pushed by the flower girl, laughing the whole way. It became one of Samantha's favorite photos. Problem number 8, hair and makeup no-show. A flat tire derailed the glam squad. Samantha's best friend YouTubed a look and did everyone's hair in the bathroom of the vineyard. It was simple, soft, and somehow perfect. Problem number 9, DJ disappeared. No explanation, no music. A groomsman grabbed a speaker, Julian made a playlist, and they danced to everything from Frank Sinatra to 2000s pop. Everyone said it was the best party they'd ever been to. Problem number 10, the wedding rings were in the wrong tucks. At the altar, the best man checked his pockets and blanched. Wrong jacket. A 10-minute pause and a mad dash to the car later. Ring secured. Samantha laughed the whole time, holding Julian's hand and whispering, "Let's just get married already." Despite the chaos, or maybe because of it, Samantha and Julian's wedding turned into something more beautiful than she could have planned. It wasn't flawless. It was real. Every twist and turn only deepened their love and reminded them why they chose each other. That night, under a sky lit with stars and string lights, Samantha looked at her new husband and said, "This was the best disaster I've ever survived."